What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, live for your NFL trade deadline preview. So I thought, typically I don't do a trade deadline preview, but I was thinking of a video to do, and I was like, you know what? The trade deadline in the NFL this year is actually very, very interesting. And I was starting to track some rumors and some names who could be traded. I was like, there's a lot of steam here. There's a lot of smoke. And typically when there's a lot of smoke in the NFL, there can be a lot of fire. And I was like, let's do a preview because there's a lot of names that could be traded. So I'm going to go over all the names that could be traded, all the rumors of what's going on in the NFL, because the NFL trade deadline is November the 2nd, Tuesday at, I believe, 4 p.m. Eastern time. And that can be a pretty crazy day. There have been trades in the past that have definitely changed the landscape of the NFL. We've seen some big moves in the past, and I'm looking forward to it. I always am, because I'm really looking forward to seeing if any of these contending teams specifically make that extra move, that extra play, just to up that roster in a position of need or a position that they need some depth. So in this video, in this live stream, guys, I will be breaking down all the buyers, the sellers, what positions they'll be looking for, all the names, and where I think they could land potentially at the trade deadline. Now, this could be a very quiet trade deadline. There's always the case that that may happen, but we were also hoping that there might be some big moves at the trade deadline. Every year, there's at least a couple trades. Before I get started, make sure that you do Gronk spike that like button. Don't forget to Gronk spike that notification bell for the latest upload and live stream, and also subscribe to the channel for more live streams, NFL analysis, NFL commentary, and more. Also, get in that comments and let me know how you feel. Who do you think is going to be traded? Who do you want your team to trade for? Let me know in the comments. What's going on, everybody, here live? If you're joining me live, appreciate it. Thanks for joining me. As Turtle says, free Brandon Cooks. What's up, Dylan? What's up, Lena? James from Wii Sports. What's going on, guys? Thanks for joining me here live. Let's go over some of this trade deadline business here. So what I'm going to do, breaking it down, we are going to go over the buyers, teams that I think should be buyers at the trade deadline. Then we're going to go over the sellers, teams that I think should be sellers at the deadline. And then there's always the teams in the middle that I won't really be discussing. We also have some reports of players that will potentially be on the market that teams could look at. And then I'm going to go through the list of players at every spot, like quarterback, running back, wide receiver, pass rusher, all those different positions where there's multiple players that could be traded that have legitimate rumors surrounding them, and possibly talk about the maybe they could be traded, maybe they couldn't, what's the realistic possibility of this, and possibly make a prediction for where that player could land. So this is your trade deadline preview on the Bottom Line View. Don't forget to Gronk spike that like button, and let's get started with the buyers and sellers at the deadline. So again, guys, Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern time is when the trade deadline is going down. These are the buyers and sellers. Everyone else is kind of irrelevant. They land somewhere in the middle. Not saying that those teams couldn't make a move, they couldn't buy a player, they couldn't sell for a player, but these are the teams, personally, in my opinion, should be buyers or sellers. So let's start with the buyers. The Kansas City Chiefs should be a buyer this year. They have a lot of holes, specifically on defense, and I know that they are 3-4, but if they can fix aspects to their roster, they can still be a threat in a weaker AFC conference, okay? The Buffalo Bills, to me, the top team in the AFC. If they can grab a couple positions or maybe just one difference maker, I feel that may put them over the top to win the Super Bowl. So the Buffalo Bills. The Baltimore Ravens, they have a couple of holes, specifically on the offensive side of the football, that they might want to address at the deadline. The Tennessee Titans, I think, should be buyers, although I'm not sure if they will be, But I do think there are positions on offense, like the offensive line, where they could take a look at depth concerns, possibly even wide receiver or tight end, and make a play at those spots. Defensive back could also be a possibility for the Titans. The Los Angeles Chargers are a team that actually make a lot of sense to me because they've been really good, kind of unexpectedly fast, and they have a lot of money on their hands to deal with. So they could be a team where I wouldn't be shocked if they're actually buyers this year, maybe a year earlier than people thought. I especially think that could be an interesting team to look at. They haven't been very aggressive in the past, but if they legitimately feel they can do something this year, they might want to be buyers. The Dallas Cowboys. We always know that Jerry Jones is aggressive, and this is a team that, for the most part, doesn't have a lot of holes, specifically offensively, but they may want to look at the defensive side of the ball for possibly one more cornerback or one more defensive lineman that could make the difference between winning the NFC and losing in the NFC Championship. The Green Bay Packers, same thing, right? The Packers are a team similar to Dallas I look at as a borderline, high-end NFC contender. This is a team that if they could add one more legitimate offensive weapon at wide receiver, tight end, with Robert Tonyan going down, that could be a big difference maker for them. Also, defensively, always adding to their secondary would not be a bad idea. Then you've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We know that they are all in, pushed all the chips to the middle of the table with Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr., the fourth, although I don't think that's correct. The Bucs will be all in, so if they want to make a move, specifically in the secondary would be the place to do it. They might want to do that. The Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals just lost J.J. Watt, so possibly going out there and getting a couple big guys inside of their defense might not be a bad idea, as well as offensive linemen inside would not be a bad idea. Los Angeles Rams. Los Angeles Rams are always very aggressive. They're always in the market to upgrade, but the question is, do they have enough cap space to do it, or even draft picks to make it happen? The New England Patriots, I think, are one of those borderline teams where I don't think they're sellers necessarily, as they did already sell Stephon Gilmore, but you could debate whether they're buyers. They're always a team, though, that looks to trade, and that's why I include them on the list, similarly to Baltimore, where they do definitely have a couple spots where if they want to help Mac Jones, they could go out and get a receiver that's on the market, because there's a few interesting ones out there. And then the New Orleans Saints would be the final buyer for me, where I don't think they're necessarily a contender, just like New England, but I would look at them and say there's a couple spots on their roster where if you get a difference maker here or a difference maker there, they could definitely compete this year, and then maybe they could keep that guy for the roster next year. So that's another team I'd take a look at. Always, guys, cap space is an issue. So looking at cap space in terms of the NFL right now, and who's at the top, who's at the bottom, most of the worst teams in the NFL are at the top. Jacksonville, Philadelphia, Denver. Now there is the Seahawks, who are potential buyer that I didn't bring up on the list due to their record, but they're always a buyer because of Russell Wilson, and they'll probably try to appease Russell Wilson if they make a play here. I could see a specific position that they might want to look at. The Carolina Panthers have $11 million. Washington, that's why I bring up the Chargers, $10 million. Steelers still have $10 million. Bengals have $9 million. Maybe the Bengals want to make a play. Typically, the Bengals are not really a trade-happy team. And then at the bottom, you got the Colts, the Saints, the Cardinals, the Atlanta Falcons, the Baltimore Ravens, the Dolphins, who could maybe use some cap space, the Detroit Lions, who could use some cap space, Raiders, Chiefs, and etc. If you guys want to check that out, that's just, I'm looking on over the cap for the cap space. So those are the buyers. And as for the sellers, I think there's 4 clear sellers in the NFL. The Eagles, who basically have said everybody and their mom, their cat, and their dog are on the block. And then there's the Detroit Lions, who obviously do not have a win this year. They are going to be selling, although I don't know really what they have to sell necessarily. There is one player that I think could be sold. The Houston Texans, who are arguably the worst team in the NFL. And the Texans, everyone that is not a rookie or a young player, I would look to sell if I was the Texans. And then lastly, the Miami Dolphins. Okay, so the Dolphins could be trading Tua, Maybe. But they could also be trading other players on their team on defense. Cornerback, defensive line, maybe even wide receiver. The Dolphins have a few players that they could sell. Before we get to Albert Breer and what he reported for the players that could be traded, let's give a shout out to Monty, who's a super chat for $4.99. Thank you, Mr. Monty. He says, keep up the hard work, Mitch. Love the videos. Also, thoughts on the Bengals and Chase and how far that team can go. Also, hashtag free Brandon Cooks. Here on the Bottom Line View, we are hashtag free Brandon Cooks, the Archer. That's how we do it here on the BLV. Thank you, Monty, for the super chat. Love you, man. He's asking about the Bengals. So I love the Bengals. What I've been seeing so far, I mean, it's faster than I thought, for sure. Definitely faster than I thought. But hey, man, it's been a breakout season for Joe Burrow. He's taken that step that we wanted to see from him. The knee injury hasn't been a factor. I don't think that's been talked about enough. I think obviously Chase has had such a huge impact on their offense with the explosive ability that he brings to the offense, right? It's hard to be an offense where everything is in little chunks. You got to make those big plays. And Jamar Chase has brought that fear to opposing defenses that's opened up everything else. It's taken pressure off Joe Burrow. It's had a receiver that Joe Burrow can throw to on the big downs and the big plays in the red zone, the third downs. You got T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd who complement him well. And then you got Joe Mixon running the rock, keeping those safeties out the box because they're scared of Jamar Chase down the field. That's only going to help down the road. And then defensively, I think is really where a lot of people are missing the boat on the Bengals. They're playing really, really well on defense. Very, very sound, and they don't make a lot of mistakes. They stop the run well. The secondary is underrated. So yes, the Bengals playing very good football, and I think they're going to be maybe not a true Super Bowl team, but definitely a problem for every AFC team this year and in the playoffs. So thank you, Monty. Those are the buyers and the sellers. If you guys also want to super chat, I'll definitely get to your comment or your question right away if I can. If you super chat, it's guaranteed. If you comment, I will try to get to it as fast as I can. But I am trying to stay on pace for the viewers that are not watching this live, but appreciate everybody that is watching me live. Don't forget to Gronk spike that like button. All right, so Albert Breer of SI reported the following on his Friday game plan column, that the Colts running back Marlon Mack, pass rushers Kamiko Toure, and Ben Bangu, that's a name. I don't really know if he's going to get traded because I don't think he really has a lot of capital. But Toure could be a guy that maybe teams look at to try to salvage something from him because he's a talented player that hasn't really had things gone right. He's had a lot of injuries. Dolphins have Devontae Parker, who could be on the move, definitely. That's a player that he noted could be traded. I would definitely look at him as maybe being a good number 2 for a lot of teams that are in need. Darius Slayton for the Giants as a potential deep threat type of guy, maybe a number 3 for a playoff contender. Evan Ingram, who's a tight end, could be maybe just need a new place to play. I mean, I think that Evan Ingram has a rare skill set, with the speed, the quickness. He's that kind of like extra slot receiver out there, right? He's not necessarily a traditional tight end, but he still can play and has some receiving skills that could help an offense. Cardinals, Andy Isabella. I really don't think Andy Isabella is going to warrant anything other than like a very late draft pick. So if a team liked him coming out of the draft and feels like he could do better in the NFL elsewhere in a new scheme, in their scheme, then heck, give it a go, I guess. Atlanta Falcons, Hayden Hurst. So this is definitely one to pay attention to because he's kind of like a borderline starting caliber tight end, but he obviously falls behind Kyle Pitts now and has had less playing time due to Cordell Patterson being an absolute beast. Then you got the Raiders, Clelin Ferrell, the former 4th overall draft pick. Mike Mayock want to maybe move on by now. He's kind of fallen into backup territory for them. Doesn't play a heck of a lot of snaps. They could get a pick or a different type of player for him. The Raiders probably don't want to be a seller because they are 5-2. But if they could get another player, maybe a secondary guy or flip him for a decent pick, I'm sure they'd do that. The Eagles linebackers, Eric Wilson and Alex Singleton, and Andre Dillard. So Eric Wilson could be a guy that I think is interesting for linebacker needy teams. Maybe you look at the Chiefs, for example, or who's another one? That's tough, actually. Would you go back to Minnesota? I don't think they necessarily need linebackers. Maybe the Bengals would use a little bit of depth, or the Ravens. I'm not sure, but Eric Wilson, I think, is a solid player. And lastly, Josh Reynolds of the Titans, who hasn't been playing a ton even when Julio is out or A.J. Brown is out. Josh Reynolds has struggled to get on the field. So he's been kind of a total bust of a signing. Maybe he could go somewhere else and contribute as a number 3, as he did with the Rams. So those are the Albert Breer noted players that are interesting. Now let's go over the ones that I think could be traded. Monty says, a white unicorn with rainbow hair. So on my eCam, it shows up as just words. So I don't understand what that means. I assume it's just an emoji of a white unicorn with rainbow hair. So I appreciate that, Monty. Thank you. And Rory's in the chat. What's going on, Rory? Thank you for joining us here tonight. Okay, let's get to the quarterbacks. So quarterback, most important position in the NFL. There are a number of quarterbacks who could be traded at this year's NFL trade deadline that I think are very interesting to discuss. There's a lot of hypothetical names here, but there's also some names with a lot of steam behind it. Of course, first and foremost is Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has all of the off the field issues that I don't really feel like discussing at this point in time. But you can't deny it as an NFL content creator. I cannot deny that the guy is in the news. So for that fact, I have to talk about him. Deshaun Watson, it does feel like if he is going to be traded, it's going to be the Miami Dolphins. We've seen multiple reports, a multitude of them, that he has actually, in fact, already agreed to go to the Miami Dolphins, that there's already a trade in place. How real are those reports? I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. But it does seem to make sense. There's a lot of I feel like the Dolphins have never truly been sold on Tua, and that is starting to creep into, I think, the football. And I think the Dolphins want to get a franchise quarterback. And I think most specifically their owner wants Deshaun Watson. And whenever an owner wants a quarterback, he gets a quarterback. That's just the way it works in the NFL. The owners run the NFL, period. As much as you may think it's the players or the coaches, it's the owners. They run the NFL at the end of the day. And if they want a player, they're going to get a player. If Robert Kraft says we're trading Jimmy Garoppolo, then we're trading Jimmy Garoppolo. You know what I mean? So Deshaun Watson to the Dolphins, maybe that's the way. But if he doesn't go to the Dolphins, we've heard that Carolina could be out on these discussions, although I would never rule the Panthers out due to the way that they have kind of been out there aggressive and go after what they want sort of thing. They got Gilmore earlier. They're not satisfied with Sam Darnold, but they did make a move to get Sam Darnold. They're constantly searching to upgrade that quarterback position. So I wouldn't necessarily get rid of Carolina from that discussion. I definitely think Deshaun, that would be his best landing spot, personally. And lastly, the Philadelphia Eagles. I would not rule out the Eagles because they have a lot of draft picks. They have an actual quarterback who might warrant some sort of trade value. And I think the Eagles have always been a team that's been willing to make trades, have been willing to go out there and make a big move, a big splash, and get what they want. So I think Deshaun Watson could go to any of those three teams. I wouldn't be surprised. I just personally think my prediction for Deshaun Watson would be that he isn't traded. And the reason is because I just think there's too much smoke behind the Deshaun Watson off the field. And for the asking price of what the Texans are asking for, it's way too risky for the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Panthers to make a big move, to trade a bunch of picks. right? It does feel like Miami is most willing to do so. That's why I feel like we've seen the reports that Carolina is not willing to do so, because it's too risky, and it could be too risky. I think it is too risky. If I was a team looking for a quarterback, I'd probably not do it, okay? But you never know. Maybe they'll have a term in place, a contract in place that states, Deshaun, if you're found out to have done these acts and things, then you won't be on our team and we'll have to revoke this trade. But if he's all good, off the exempt list, ready to go, then the trade will go through. Maybe there's going to be a deal in place like that. And we have heard rumors of that. So that's Deshaun Watson. Next, Tua. So Tua, I do think, has a good possibility of being traded. I think where the Dolphins are at right now, it might be wise to trade Tua, given the fact that it doesn't, and this is all surrounding that I don't think they want Tua for the future, okay? So the fact that they don't want Tua for the future means that I think they should trade him. Now, if they did want Tua to be the guy, then don't trade Tua, right? But I don't think that's the case. So, Tua, if he's not the guy, where they're at right now in terms of their record, they've got 1 win on the year. Trade Tua, okay? There's a number of teams that I think might be interested in him, and these are the ones that came to mind. Washington. Now, Ryan Fitzpatrick is possibly coming back, but they don't have the quarterback of the future in Washington. It's clearly not Taylor Heineken, okay? So they're looking for a quarterback of the future, and I don't believe this year's draft is the year to get a quarterback, specifically where Washington will be picking, okay? So if that's the case, Tua to Washington would make some sense. I think maybe they pull a Carolina. Have a year with Tua, see if he fits the scheme, see if he fits the system, see if he works for the franchise, and he is the guy. And if he is, you keep him. If he isn't, you move on from him. No big deal. You pull a Sam Darnold that way. So Washington does make sense to maybe go after a young quarterback like Tua. They're not making the playoffs, but for the future. Houston in a deal for Deshaun Watson could possibly be the move. I mean, it could possibly work that way. If the Dolphins do end up getting Deshaun, maybe Tua's involved, especially with his recent performance. That might be enough for Houston to take a look at him as their future franchise quarterback. The Denver Broncos. Teddy Bridgewater's not the answer. Teddy Bridgewater might be another guy that I discuss, actually. He's going to be gone at least in the offseason. There's no doubt. And Tua is a guy that the Broncos have been swinging and missing at quarterbacks. But Tua's a younger guy. Tua's a guy that maybe they could still develop into being a quarterback. And I would say he does fit the current offense there. Then you've got Pittsburgh. This one's an interesting one to me because I think this is Ben's final season. And if Pittsburgh's going to be aggressive to get a quarterback of the future, you might want to take a look at Tua, right? I think that he would fit the mold in Pittsburgh. I would actually like to see Tua with Mike Tomlin. And I think he'd have success there, right? I also think they don't have a future quarterback. Where they'll be picking in the draft is not going to be conducive to picking a quarterback in this year's draft. And Pittsburgh's usually a team that likes to compete yearly, seasonally. They're not a team that likes to rebuild. So with that being said, Ben possibly retiring this offseason would mean maybe we go after a quarterback that's cheap, still on his rookie contract, we can take a look at as our franchise quarterback. And lastly, the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers, I'm really intrigued to see if they make a move. Like, would they be willing? This is an interesting thought. Would the Dolphins be willing to trade like Tua for Darnold and a pick? Or would the Broncos be willing to trade Teddy Bridgewater and something, or Locke and something for Tua? Or, would the Broncos and the Panthers be willing to do a Darnold for Bridgewater swap? Because Carolina had some success with Bridgewater there. He already knows the offense. I think that one's a very interesting one to think about. Could the Panthers, a team that's not quite out of it, they made a move for Stephon Gilmore already. They think that they can make the playoffs, but they just don't have the quarterback. Would the Panthers be willing to swap Darnold for Bridgewater right now? Think about it. Nick Foles, okay? Nick Foles has been discussed from the Bears' perspective. I'm not sure where he'll end up, but that's somebody to think about as a potential backup, or maybe a guy that could mentor a young rookie quarterback. So I just threw Nick Foles into there. Drew Lock is another guy from the Denver Broncos. You know, maybe the Texans. You know what? The Texans, if they're smart, I'd throw a 6th round pick out there, a 5th round pick out there for Drew Lock. Why not? These guys got talent. Give them a chance at your place to play. You know, why not? I mean, it's probably worth a late round pick if you're one of these quarterback needy teams that's not really in a position to win this year. Take a look at Drew Lock for the rest of the season. See if he's got something. You know, I personally don't think he'll ever be a franchise quarterback, but I do think he has enough talent to warrant a look. And then you got Jordan Love, okay? Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. That would be potentially the Jimmy Garoppolo trade. Remember when the Patriots traded Jimmy G to the 49ers that one year at the trade deadline for a 2nd round pick? Could a team, and would a team, be willing to trade for Jordan Love? Would the Packers be willing to set things right with Aaron Rodgers and trade Jordan Love for a pick right now? I'm sure if you offered the Packers a 1st round pick at the trade deadline, they would do it. If you offered them a 2nd, that's where things would get interesting. That could be something to think about for a number of teams. Maybe they want to check that Jordan Love tape. But that is one that I don't think enough people are talking about. I could certainly see the Packers trying to appease Aaron Rodgers by trading Jordan Love. Okay? So the quarterbacks. The running back position. There are a few running backs out there. Marlon Mack, Ronald Jones, Melvin Gordon, David Johnson are the names I have here. Marlon Mack is the one that's created the most stir, the most buzz, the most rumors. Teams that I think would be willing to give up picks for a running back: the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Seahawks. Okay, so the Baltimore Ravens have lost all of their running backs, and as far as I've seen from watching them play, they do not have the answer there. They are a team that legitimately values running backs. Would they be willing to trade for Marlon Mack? I think that's a good place to be. Now, the Colts have to make the decision of whether they'd be willing to deal, right? Would they be willing to deal Marlon Mack inside the AFC? That's always something where it's like a lot of teams don't like to deal in conference, especially when the Colts are a team that might make the playoffs, right? But Marlon Mack, I think, would fit the Ravens' power running style. You've got Ronald Jones, who, as far as Bruce Arians has said, they're not trading him. But I mean, I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. I think he would be a great fit in Baltimore. But you also got the Chiefs and the Seahawks. I think that I include the Seahawks there because Chris Carson is expected to be out for the rest of the year. Pete Carroll loves to run the ball. Alex Collins is just okay, right? With this news popping up about Chris Carson, I could see them making a move for a running back. I wouldn't be shocked by that, Ronald Jones, I don't think is going to get traded, but I wanted to include his name there. Melvin Gordon makes a lot of sense to me. Melvin Gordon makes a lot of sense because I think Melvin Gordon is good enough where he would actually probably get some interest from a few teams because he's looked pretty good this year. But at the same time, the Broncos aren't probably going to make the playoffs. Melvin Gordon is a little bit older for a running back, so you got to take advantage of him at this moment right now. And they have Javonte Williams, who they invested a high draft pick in, a second-round pick. So Melvin Gordon makes a lot of sense to me to be traded from the Broncos to probably not the Chiefs, but like the Ravens, I think would be interesting in like a Mark Ingram 2-3 years ago type of way. And David Johnson, lastly, I think could fill a role as a pass catcher. You know, if I were to guess, I think David Johnson to the Chiefs would make some sense because he does have a multifaceted game. And I feel like he's the type of player where David Johnson would be like what they were trying to look at from Le'Veon Bell last year but never got. David Johnson would be like a better version of that. You know, he's a good receiver. He can catch the ball in the backfield. He still can run fairly well. He could contribute without Clyde there. Adding a David Johnson to Darrell Williams for a late pick wouldn't be a bad idea, and I think he fits the offense. So personally, I'd go Marlon Mack to Baltimore, Melvin Gordon maybe to Baltimore, or the Chiefs, or not the Chiefs, or the Seahawks. And then you go David Johnson to the Chiefs. I think that would make sense. I don't think Ronald Jones, but there could also be other running backs that I'm not discussing here. If you guys have any ideas, let me know in the comments. Rory says Barkley. I very much doubt that, but you never know. All right, so those are the running backs. If you guys have any like players at any positions that I missed, let me know in the comments. Certainly willing to discuss any questions or comments you have. Rory also asked, where's Cam going? If he's going anywhere, it feels like he'll go to Seattle. All right. Then we got the wide receiver position. Carolina for running back. Unless CMC is out for the year. I mean, I guess that could happen. But I think they're getting McCaffrey back, right? Like, what if Carolina traded Christian McCaffrey? That would be pretty wild. Wide receivers. So there's a lot of interesting wide receiver names, I think, that could be traded. Like some really good football players too. So Allen Robinson being near the top of the list here. Allen Robinson is, I still think, a very good football player. You know, last year, arguably a top 10 receiver in football. The last couple of years in a row, he was a top 10, top 15 receiver in the NFL. And could be a good number one or an excellent number two receiver. Allen Robinson could go to Kansas City. That's one where that would make a lot of sense. He's like a better version of what they had in Sammy Watkins. I feel like he would upgrade their short intermediate passing game a ton. Green Bay, he would be kind of a similar but different type of, Devontae Adams light, as a number two. That would be an amazing duo. Two great route runners. Then you got New Orleans, who I think needs a wide receiver. Could Allen Robinson fit the mold there? But I don't know if the Saints have enough money. The Chargers, I don't think Allen Robinson would necessarily be the fit. But I think the Chargers should be looking at a wide receiver. I definitely do. Because if you go from Mike Williams and Keenan Allen to Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and a pretty good number three, not to say that Jalen Guyton or Palmer are bad, but when you get that good number three, that is just such a difference maker. The New England Patriots, I always discuss the potential receiver addition. Allen Robinson does feel like he would fit in New England. From just a route running perspective, and that might be the type of guy where Belichick would take a look. And then the Buffalo Bills, who I know their receivers are playing well, but honestly, I think they should look at a wide receiver. And there's one specifically I think they should look at, but I wouldn't rule out any of those teams. The Ravens as well, I would throw into the mix as a team that's a potential contender who could look at a wide receiver. Durkant says the Colts. I don't know if he said the Browns. Not sure about the Browns. I don't think the Browns are looking to add a receiver unless they trade a receiver. But the Colts, yeah, I mean, maybe. You've got Deshaun Jackson, who's asked for a trade. Deshaun Jackson, I could see going to like any contender because I don't think he costs a lot. He's kind of like a 1-year rental. So I could see Deshaun Jackson going to the Chiefs, opposite Tyreek Hill. That would be pretty incredible. I could see him going to the Packers as a deep threat for Aaron Rodgers. I could see him going to the Bills as another veteran receiver. I could see him going to the Ravens for the opposite Marquise Brown wide receiver, put Bateman in the slot there. I mean, that would be pretty interesting. So there's a lot of different places I think Deshaun Jackson could go just because he's like very cheap and he's clearly on the block. Then you've got Brandon Cooks, although I will say I don't think Deshaun Jackson would make a lot of sense to go to a team within the NFC. Or within the NFC West, just because the Rams are invested in winning the Super Bowl. So you might not see him go to the Packers. That might be a bad call. But the AFC, possibly. Turtle keeps saying Tim Patrick to the Packers, so we're going to go with that one. Brandon Cooks. So free Brandon Cooks, the archer himself. Where is he going to go? So I think the dream here for Brandon Cooks in terms of a fit would be the Bills. I think that would be a perfect fit because Brandon Cooks has played in New England, obviously similar system, similar verbiage, and he would be just so awesome in that offense with Josh Allen, and then on the opposite side, Stephon Diggs. So that would be pretty dope. I think that would be an amazing fit. But I could also see him in the Chargers. I think would be pretty cool. Giving a deep threat speed receiver for the Chargers, I think would be a difference maker and a game changer because you've got Keenan Allen as kind of the short intermediate guy. You've got Mike Williams as the jump ball guy. And then you got Brandon Cooks as the speed guy. I think that would be pretty fun. Returning to New Orleans would make some sense. Again, money might be an issue. But here's the thing with Brandon Cooks that makes him very tradable is that I think he's playing on a contract that would only pay him about $2 million for the rest of the year. So that makes it very affordable for any team that wants to look at him. Someone brings up Afix here, brings up Brandon Ayuk as being traded. I doubt it. The Kansas City Chiefs would make a lot of sense for Brandon Cooks just because another deep threat in a deep threat offense. Although that's not exactly what Brandon Cooks is. He's not just a deep threat. He is a well-rounded receiver. He's not necessarily the over the middle. That's kind of what Kelsey's for, though. So I could see the Chiefs making a move. I could see the Packers trying to make a move for Brandon Cooks. New England makes a lot of sense to me. Because he's played there. Obviously, there's familiarity there. I think it definitely helps where a team, especially wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, I think having a receiver be in the same offense he's already played in or play in a similar offense that he's already played in. Like, for example, Brandon Cooks to New England, Brandon Cooks to the Saints, for example. We've seen those go better. Like Emmanuel Sanders to the Niners, for example. That was a good fit because Emmanuel Sanders was traded from the Broncos. He already sort of knew the offense. So it didn't take a lot of time to adapt. That is certainly something where if Brandon Cooks were to go to the Chiefs, it's a little bit more of you got to get up to speed with things. Or the Packers, you got to get up to speed with things. Although I will say Brandon Cooks has played on like 5 teams. So he probably knows more offenses than most receivers. Odell Beckham Jr., you've been waiting for it. I really hope he gets traded. As a huge Odell guy, huge fan of the player and the person, I feel like he needs to get traded. Like if I was Odell Beckham Jr., I'd be praying that I get traded on Tuesday. That I'm praying, even though I'm hurt right now, Heal me up, get me ready. This is where, too, if Odell were traded, let's say, wherever he goes, New England, okay? They give him a week, they give him 2 weeks to get healthy and then learn the offense, and then you play 3 weeks from now. Like, I could see that being the case for Odell if he were to be traded. Get him healthier, get that arm rested up, and then get him out there in 2-3 weeks. But Odell Beckham, if the Browns lose to the Steelers, Odell, I feel, could very well be traded. If they win versus the Steelers, I think he might not be traded till the offseason. Or maybe even straight up cut. I could see that as well. So, if the Browns are smart, though, they might want to take advantage of the window right now, where they could trade Odell right now and possibly get the most they could get because of the fact that, hey, let's be honest, in the offseason, teams are less inclined to trade for players if they're contenders. Now, you're going to have a wider variety of teams to trade to, and a lot of teams are going to be willing to trade for him in the offseason because then they have time to get him up to speed and things like that. But at the trade deadline, some teams are desperate to win, so that's also a factor. Darius Slayton is a player that I could see being traded because he's like, let's look at it, right? So Sterling Shepard's there. Kadarius Toney has proven to be a great pick. He's a first-round pick. He's going to be there for the next 4 years. And then you've got Kenny Galladay, who they've signed long-term. So there's 3 receivers. So at best, Darius Slayton's the 4th receiver. So he could go anywhere, really. I mean, I don't think he costs a lot. He could go to any team that needs a depth guy. Darius Slayton would be a guy that maybe makes sense for the Chiefs. Don't have a lot of money. Probably can't afford an upper echelon name, but does sort of fit their offense and makes sense that way. Andy Isabella, I brought that up because he was on the the list of names. I have no idea where he would go. He could go to any team. He could go for the Lions. He could go to the Lions. Like, I wouldn't be shocked by that. Jamison Crowder, you know what? Like, a team that needs a shorter intermediate slot receiver could use Jamison Crowder. I think Crowder's still pretty good. So I think, who's a team that could use him? I would say the Chiefs again could use him. But who else? Would the Ravens maybe use a Jamison Crowder? Who else could use a Jamison Crowder? Just thinking. Like, I don't think necessarily the Chargers. Like, the Packers brought in Minnesota, says there can't. Maybe. They've been a pretty aggressive team this season, so maybe. He has a weird contract. Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably a few teams that might take a look at him because he's not going to really cost a lot in terms of trade capital. Will Fuller is the last name. Devontae Parker, I guess you could throw in the mix here. Crowder to Seattle. Yeah, I could see that. They need to pass more, though. Will Fuller, the Packers make sense to me a lot. Will Fuller to the Packers. That makes a lot of sense. Will Fuller to the Seahawks? I mean, that would be wild. Imagine Tyler Lockett, Will Fuller, and DK Metcalf. Oh my goodness, that would be insane. That would be pretty cool. And then Devontae Parker. Ooh. Devontae Parker to... Why do I feel like the Saints? I don't know why. I feel like Devontae Parker to Turtles team would make sense. Maybe Turtle will shut me down on that one, but... All right. So those are the wide receivers. And I only really have one offensive line name. There's probably a bunch that could be traded potentially, but there is one name that kind of stands above the rest, which is Andre Dillard of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think the clear opportunity to be traded here is to the Baltimore Ravens, who are without Ronnie Stanley. And Also, Villanueva has been pretty below average, pretty bad at times. So I think Andre Dillard from the Eagles to the Ravens for a mid-round pick, a fourth-round pick would not be out of the question. Baltimore has consistently traded for positions of need at the deadline. Marcus Peters, there's been a lot of guys like that they've traded for. So I think the Ravens, Dillard, that makes sense, which means it probably won't happen. Durkant says Parker's a perfect number 2 for Wentz. And Turtle, I'm kind of thinking like the big-bodied target there. Parker, like the Mike Evans for Jameis. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Tight ends, you got Evan Ingram, O.J. Howard, Hayden Hurst, Eric Ebron. Those are the names that I have written down here. Evan Ingram, that's an interesting one. The tight ends and the wide receiver teams, the teams that need the same sort of, they just need receiving targets in general. Where could Evan Ingram fit? Where do you guys think Evan Ingram would be a good fit? I think Evan Ingram, let's see. I think the Bills are pretty much settled on Dawson Knox. The Saints? Would the Saints look at Evan Ingram? I mean, they need a tight end. The Packers, I think the Packers would make sense. But I think Eric Ebron makes a lot of sense for the Packers. I think he makes a lot of sense for the Packers. That big tight end red zone target perfectly fits for Robert Tonyan. I feel like that is like a perfect fit. O.J. Howard, I don't think is going to go anywhere just because Tampa is in full Super Bowl mode and they can use as many players as they can have. But if they could flip O.J. Howard for like a corner or a safety, I could see that happening. But I think they would have to trade O.J. Howard for a player. I don't think it's going to be for a pick, but I could be wrong. And Durkant brought up O.J. Howard to the Titans. The Titans could use a tight end. Right, and I think the one that makes sense to me is like a Hayden Hurst. Pretty solid blocker, good athlete. They could use him in a similar way to how Jonnu was used. I could see Hayden Hurst for a late pick to the Titans. I think he might fit there. Troutman's done nothing, so I don't see how the Saints love him that much, to be honest. So those are the tight ends. And then moving to the defensive side of the football, we've got pass rushers. There's some pass rushers on the block. 3 teams that I think pass rushers would work for. Kansas City, for sure. The Chargers, I think, could use depth on the D-line in general. Dallas could use a pass rusher. I wouldn't rule out the Colts. I wouldn't rule out the Ravens. I wouldn't rule out, who else? The Bengals could use some depth on the D-line, although they traded earlier in the year for the kid B.J. Hill from the Giants. And who else? The Bucks are good there. Packers have made moves there already. Who else? Yeah. I think the Chargers, the Chiefs, those teams for pass rushers really make sense. Like Melvin Ingram back to the Chargers could be a play. The Chiefs for Melvin Ingram could be a play. Melvin Ingram has stated that he wants to be traded from the Steelers. He's not getting enough play time. That feels like a very, very Chief-like trade. That could even be a Raven-like trade. We've seen the Ravens make those sort of additions in the past. 49ers. He fits the defense, but I don't know if the 49ers are necessarily buyers at the moment. They might be more so sellers. But Melvin Ingram's still a good player. Like, I think he can still play. Emmanuel Ogbah has been brought up by multiple people. I don't think this would be a good trade by the Dolphins because I think he's arguably been their best defensive player this year. But there's probably, that would probably cost a decent amount. Now, his contract is up after this year. That's interesting. I'm not sure where he would go. The Chiefs, he was on the Chiefs like a couple years ago, but it wasn't exactly a great fit, So the Cowboys kind of have edge players like him. You know, they may be more so looking at D linemen. You've got Trey Flowers, who I think the obvious one is going back to New England. That just makes too much sense, to be honest. But, you know, maybe another team would take a look at Trey Flowers, a well-rounded edge player who's pretty good. Derek Barnett is another one from the Eagles whose contract is up, and last year don't feel like he's going to be re-signed. Maybe he could go somewhere and contribute as a rotation guy or a complimentary pass rusher. You know, Derek Barnett's more so like a decent number 2 to your number 1 pass rusher. So you could see him go and get moved from the Eagles. So those are the D linemen. Let me know any teams that you think could take a look at D linemen, but those are kind of the ones that jump out to me. I could see like Derek Barnett, Trey Flowers, they might be decent fits for like the Bengals. I think the Raiders are kind of done buying D linemen, so I don't think they would be interested. Kamiko Toure to like the Niners maybe would make sense, or the Seahawks maybe would make sense. The Chargers as well. Or no, not the Chargers. Yeah. And secondary. So Atlanta, could they be buyers? I mean, maybe. I doubt it, but possibly. Defensive backs. I got 3 names here with some smoke around them. Kyle Fuller of the Broncos. Kyle Fuller, I think, would perfectly fit in Green Bay. They run the same defense, and I think that would be a very easy transition. I could see Kyle Fuller going to the Chargers, but I don't think that they need corners necessarily. I don't think, you know, would the Rams look at Kyle Fuller? Like, I don't know if they have enough money, but I don't think Kyle Fuller is making a lot of money this year. I think his contract's pretty affordable. Kyle Fuller to the Bucks could also make some sense. But I would look out for the Dallas Cowboys. I feel like they could use a number 2 corner. Like, as coach is saying here, Fuller to the boys. I do think that might be their biggest position of need, is their second perimeter corner does need some work. So if they could get Kyle Fuller, that might be a good ad, or just even someone a little bit lesser than that might be a decent ad for them. Xavier Howard is a number 1, and I think he's too expensive for the Cowboys, but he is somebody that has been on the trade block, and I think Xavier Howard could be traded. I think he is a perfect fit for the Tampa Bay Bucks, but that he just makes too much money. Like, it wouldn't work. In terms of where else he could go, I also think he's a perfect fit for the Saints, but the Saints don't have enough money. And who else? Like, I don't think he's a great fit for the Packers. Who else? The Chiefs. I think he's a great fit for the Chiefs. If they have somehow, if they could get enough money for him, that may be a move. And let's see who are on my buyers list here. Cardinals. Cardinals could be after maybe Fuller. I could see that one. Bills don't make sense to me. Patriots probably not. Especially not Howard, because that's within division, and that would be probably the worst place to trade him, because you don't trade great corners to Belichick. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Titans. I mean, the Titans could maybe be in the conversation for a cornerback. So Howard, maybe. And then Marcus May from the Jets, safety. The obvious one is the Bucks because of Todd Bowles. But I think there's other places that he could go. So he's played in a multitude of schemes now, so I feel like he has some flexibility to play free or strong safety depending on where he lands. So that really opens up the door for a lot of different landing spots. So I could see Marcus May. The Titans need corners more so than safeties. I think the Ravens would be a great landing spot for him, and they're always willing to add defensive backs. The Chiefs could desperately use a Marcus May. so they could just get Daniel Sorensen off the damn field. Chargers don't really need him. The Cowboys have been after safeties, specifically ones from the Jets, so that might make some sense. The Packers don't need safeties. The Cardinals, probably not. The Saints, probably not. They don't need safeties. Patriots, no. So the buyers list doesn't really see a lot of opportunities for Marcus May. And then those are the final names I have in terms of secondary guys. If you guys have any other names out there, let me know in the comments right now. I'll answer any questions you got or any potential player landing spots that you think would be interesting, or maybe send a dream trade out that you think would be fun. Put that in the comments, guys. So if you've enjoyed this live stream so far, a trade deadline 2021 preview, make sure that you do spike that like button. Also, subscribe to the channel for more BLV and spike that notification bell for the latest upload. Coach brings up the Raiders. That's a good one. The Raiders, Marcus May. Yeah, that could work. The Titans, I feel like their safeties. I mean, I could be wrong. May has been rumored to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do they have any... I mean, they have cap space. So, I think the Steelers need corners more so than safeties, but hey, why not? Raiders need a top receiver. I don't know why, but I was immediately thinking Odell to the Raiders, but it just feels right. Monty says Patriots to the playoffs. Damn right, Monty. You know it, bro. Patriots to the playoffs after they upset the Chargers in LA. The Titans aren't a Super Bowl contender, to be fair, Turtle, but Dane Krunchek is pretty good, if I pronounce his name right, but he's a pretty good player. And obviously Kevin Byard is pretty good too. So I think they like their safeties. I think they need corners. If I was the Titans, I'd be paying for Xavier Howard. That's what I'd be doing. Jerkant calls me a clown. Appreciate that. Coach says the Pats are done. Coach, don't underestimate the Patriots. They're coming for you. Don't underestimate it. Saints to the bowl after Brandon comes. All right. Turtle, how excited would you be for Brandon Cooks to return to the Saints? How excited? Monty says Patriots going to walk into LA and show Justin Herbert what's up. Yes, sir. Monty knows. Monty is right. Monty knows. If you guys haven't already, wrong way. There it is. Follow us at The Bottom Line View on Instagram, on Twitter, at Mitch Milani. Steelers to the bowl after getting Tua, Cooks, May, Dillard, Fuller, and Poole. Poole's on the Patriots. He actually signed with New England earlier in the week, so good move for the Patriots. Turtle says, "In Brandon comes back, we're better than Tampa." If Brandon comes back, I assume you mean. Probably not, but hey, you can always dream. You know what I mean? Kendrick Bourne's going to catch a touchdown, says Monty. Niners says Niners are trash. Don't bet on them this year to cover. Monty says, will Jacoby score his first receiving touchdown? Yes. Yes. He's overdue. Durkant calls it a trash move. Okay. He loved it when the Steelers made it in his hypothetical. But RJ says, I think the Saints need another physical wide receiver because they already have speed everywhere. They don't have a lot of speed. I mean, Deontay Harris is fast, I guess. Kenny Stills is kind of fast, but he's older. But they do need a deep threat wide receiver. Michael Thomas is slant boy, so he's got the underneath covered. That's for sure. Durkant thinks Cooks is staying. I think Cooks will end up leaving at least in the offseason. You would hope, right? You would hope. Elena says Jameis overthrows. Who will score more touchdowns this season, Jacoby or Julio? I think Julio already is up on him, so I'm going to go with Julio. Traquan, says RJ. Traquan is the worst football player in the NFL. Caesar says Niners. Monty says start Mike Evans or Devontae Booker. Evans. Durcan says Titans 31, Steelers 28 in the AFC Championship. All right. On that note, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you guys for joining me here for your NFL trade deadline preview. Hopefully I covered all the news and the rumors and the names that could be traded before Tuesday or on Tuesday. Most likely you'll see it early Tuesday if there are trades. Maybe even Monday. That could always happen too. But appreciate all you guys tuning in. Thank you for watching. It's been Mitch of the Bottom Line View. Don't forget to Gronk Spike that like button. And we will see you on Sunday for the live streams. Patriots, Chargers, and I believe I will be doing the Titans and the Colts before that for our doubleheader on the Bottom Line View. Peace!